We're gonna talk about it.
Sounds like you're the jerk.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Yeah, hold down. Okay. And then you get a lot of good either people showed up at the game, but they're going home.
Welcome to this evening's Committee of Adjustment meeting. Members of the public, applicants, agents, and staff may be participating this evening either in person or virtually via Zoom. For those attending via Zoom, please note that it is our standard practice for members of the public to have their cameras off and microphones muted until it is time for that member to speak. Township staff can assist with muting microphones. If you require assistance, please use the chat function and ask staff. I am pleased to advise that we are being broadcast live on the Township's YouTube channel, where a recording of this meeting will be available. Note that Townships does not have the ability to edit the live stream or recorded version of the meeting. Public meetings have been called and notice circulated in accordance with the Planning Act with respect to applications for minor variance and/or consent. The purpose of public meetings are to inform and provide the public with an opportunity to ask questions and to express views with respect to applications. The format of the public meeting is as follows. Township staff will explain the purpose of the application and report all correspondence received. Next, the applicant will present any further relevant information. Next, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And next, the members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification of the application. After all comments have been received, the committee will consider the application with due regard to the presentations and views expressed this evening. The committee will then do one of three things: approve the application, deny the application, or defer the application pending receipt of additional information. Specified persons who have provided oral submissions or written objections but disagree with the committee's decision on an application may appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as entitled under the Planning Act. The deadline for appeal of consent applications is 20 days within the giving of notice, and for the minor variance within 20 days of the decision date. When commenting on an application, please first give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that the names and addresses of those individuals who speak at this meeting will appear within the meeting minutes, which are public documents. If you wish to receive a copy of the decision, please leave your name and address with the township staff. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Adoption of minutes. Get a motion. So motion COA 2024-001, moved by member Vandergeest, seconded by member Hawkins, that the minutes of the December 19th, 2023 Committee of Adjustment meeting be adopted as printed and distributed. Were carried. So adjourned applications. Would township staff please introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated?
Thank you, Chair. So our first application on the agenda this evening is an adjourned application for minor variance, being A1822, located at 1696 Pappy Gill Lane. This is subject to another public meeting, and it was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. We have received additional public correspondence related to this application from Donna and Marty Becker at 1719 Pappy Gill Lane. The nature of their correspondence outlined some comments regarding the requested setbacks, seeking confirmation of the requested setbacks and septic, as well as the servicing capacity of the existing septic. Would inquire about the existing sleeping cabin on the subject property, and clarification on the revision to the application from the original proposal. I will now go over the staff report. So as was discussed throughout the staff report, the subject property is located at 1696 Pappy Gill Lane. The subject property is a shoreline residential property with frontage along Gloucester Pool. As seen on screen, this is an aerial image of the subject property. This is from 2023. So as you can see, the subject property is currently developed with an existing cottage, a sleeping cabin, and a private detached garage closer to the northern property line. The applicants are proposing the reconstruction and enlargement of an existing non-complying dwelling. Again, the property is along the shoreline of Gloucester Pool, being a key hydrologic feature under the current planning regime. The application was initially heard in August of 2022, where it was deferred pending additional information, in this case being a lot grading plan, updated construction drawings, shoreline restoration plan, servicing, and details along those lines. The applicant has provided a revised proposal, including the information requested. So as detailed on screen, the applicants have provided a revised proposal and are seeking a reduced front yard shoreline setback to accommodate an attached unenclosed first and second story deck, an attached enclosed first story deck, setback for the dwelling, as well as an increased height. As outlined in the previous staff report, as referenced in the staff report before us this evening, the new minor variances that were not originally contemplated on the application relate to the keeping of the existing deck, the addition of a second story deck, and the expansion of the main floor deck to expand it further and to enclose it. And additionally, the last new request is for an increased height. So as depicted on screen, this is a lot grading plan, site plan that was provided by the applicants with their revised proposal. As outlined in the staff report, and as you can see on screen, the subject property is quite constrained. There is a large steep slope to the north of the property, as you can see here. And the development of the subject property is constrained by the shoreline, Pappy Gill Lane to the rear, kind of restricting the developable area of the property to approximately this area as depicted on the screen. The existing septic system is located to the rear of the dwelling, and this is the footprint of the proposed reconstructed dwelling, including the decks and the now proposed enclosed deck here. The chief building official did note that the location of the existing septic system really is the only location on the property where a new or existing system could be located. So staff do acknowledge that the development on site is quite constrained. However, as outlined in the staff report, the applicant is proposing to further expand beyond what is existing in the VPZ area, being the first 30 meters inward from the shore of Gloucester Pool, bringing the front wall closer to the shoreline here, and expanding beyond the existing footprint. This is kind of a concern when combined with the additional requested height. There's concern that the structure could be quite imposing from the shoreline. So staff are recommending that the applicants take some time to potentially explore a revised proposal, which would better balance the protection of the shoreline ecologically as well as visually, just to ensure that all of the tests for a minor variance, as well as that applicable provincial policy, is being maintained and satisfied. The applicant did provide a shoreline restoration plan as sort of conceptual, but again, staff do note that there is proposed expansion that wasn't originally contemplated with the initial application. So there is question if the current proposal as is would be maximizing the restoration of that shoreline area to the maximum extent possible, or if there's opportunity to really preserve and enhance that area to achieve the goals of the growth plan and the provincial policy statement. I will highlight again that the zoning bylaw does also include a requirement for a shoreline buffer 15 meters inland from shore. So the further expansion here of the deck and dwelling to accommodate that enclosed screen porch would further encroach into that 15 meters as established by the zoning bylaw, as well as that 30 meters established by the growth plan. So staff definitely acknowledge that the site is quite constrained, but there is question if potentially a revised proposal might better suit the site and better balance the ecological needs, the visual needs, and satisfy that applicable policy. So these are the concept elevation drawings depicting the proposed height request. Again, as discussed throughout the staff report and this evening, when combining the reduced shoreline setback further, as well as requesting an increased height, there is just concern that the proposed structure would be quite imposing along the shoreline. The township official plan and zoning bylaw being a shoreline residentially focused area, the intentions of those policies are really to maintain a low density sort of appearance, to maintain the character of the shoreline, and to make sure that all the natural features are being protected. So I have included some staff site photos. The first photo on the left of the screen was captured in 2022. I just thought it would be good to kind of see the existing structure from the shoreline. It provides a lot of context to the application. To the right is a photo that was captured in January 2024, just depicting the existing cottage as it exists today. And this is a panoramic shot of the front of the dwelling from the front wall to the shoreline. So as was included in the staff report, there was a general discussion regarding the applicable policies of the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and the 4 tests for a minor variance as prescribed by the Act. Through that, it was determined that further information or further demonstration of how the application meets those applicable policies and tests would be required. Staff definitely recognize that the property is quite unique and there are a number of unique constraints, but there may be opportunity to create a better balance and to achieve closer conformity with applicable policy. Other comments that were received from internal departments speak to the building department provided by our chief building official. They state no objection to the proposed application for minor variance. An assessment of the sewage system would be completed once a building permit and final plans are submitted. The sewage system, depending on what that final design is, may require enlargement or replacement. There's adequate area as identified on the property if a replacement system is necessary. So as outlined in the staff report, staff recommend deferral of the application pending further information and or a revised proposal, but it's certainly available for any questions.
Does the applicant or his or her agent have anything further to add to the application? Please unmute yourself and turn your camera on if you'd like. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I just like to add what I already submitted in the application. The fact that this project is not abiding to the required setback. However, the proposed construction that we proposing, I would say it basically gives very little disturbance to the shoreline. What we're planning to do is to use the existing footprint of the cottage, and not planning to excavate or demolish any structure on site. So because of that, I think even though it is not abiding to the 30-meter setback to the shoreline, however, I think because of the unique constructions involved, I think it will leave very little disturbance to the shoreline. In fact, if we were to do the new construction, I think it would put more damaging to the shoreline and the surrounding environment, because it involves demolition, it involves more excavation, and in fact, it will involve most likely it will involve a new septic tank. So all that will surely disturb the environment and the shoreline. So yeah, my point is, on paper, it sounds like the structure will be not beneficial to the shoreline. However, because of the very little impact constructions that involve in this project, I think it will actually benefit the shoreline versus a brand new construction. On top of that, with the new construction, there'll be more heavy machineries, there'll be concrete deliveries, and that will further damage the roads going into the cottage. So yeah, so that's something I like to add. Furthermore, we also provide a very comprehensive shoreline protection plan, and I think first of all, it's going to be involved very costly to implement that. So if we were to so I would say that's going to promote the growth of the shoreline and protect the shoreline as well. So really that's what I want to add. Actually, on the point of the deck and the height that could be imposing to the surrounding and I guess conformity of the constructions in close to the pool. I mean, if needed, I mean, we can actually alter the height of the structure, and the deck doesn't have to be enclosed, and perhaps we can make some modification to the deck, or may not even have the deck if that really helps to further promote the growth of the shoreline. So there's something that we can actually there's some flexibility in the designing of the structure. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's kind of what township staff was alluding to with maybe a slightly revised proposal. So that might be something that, depending the outcome here, you can talk with staff about on that later. Are there any persons participating virtually via Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me, the applicant. May be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there anybody that would like?
Hello, this is Marty and Donna. We're from 1719 Pappy Gill Lane. We just have some questions about the application.
Well, first of all, we've owned the adjoining property for 30 years. And it's the constraints of the property have always been there, which is why the detached garage is placed up high on the hill. So that didn't change after it was bought. We've seen 3 different owners on this property, and there's always been an issue with the flat part of the property, because right now, you know, there can be 4 or 5 cars parked on that flat part, and their trash cans aren't even on their own property. They're over in the right of way. And we just think if the house gets bigger, where are they, you know, they're not going to be able to have more parking area because they can't park on the septic. He had a sign up saying no parking in his own backyard. So the cars are basically parking in part of our backyard because we own the right of way behind those properties. And if the house gets any bigger, the land itself basically gets smaller. So we're concerned about that.
So I have a question. On page 16 of 52, the bird's eye view picture is still wrong. It's showing the road at Pappy Gill Lane as part of the subject property when it's really on our property. So I want to make sure you guys understand that. Page 17 is in fact correct. There's another question on page 17. When we were there this summer, we noted that they put a nail in the root of a tree by the road on our property, which is marked as TBM number 2 on page 17. I was really wondering what that is. I mean, why did they bother sticking a nail in a tree on our property by the road?
It's actually on that map, and it's at least 15 feet from the relevant property marker where there is actually a pin between our property, the subject property, and the property to the northwest. Their other neighbor, where they actually have built a fence. And you can see on any pictures from the backyard where the fence ends is where the right of way, that point is. And that's basically where these folks park.
So the question is, what is TBM number 2? Why did they put a pin in there on our land?
In our yard.
Yes.
And because the marker didn't have any identification on it. It just said something like survey control. And they also had a ribbon on by their bunkie, because their bunkie basically is on the line and it basically crosses the line a bit. So there was a marker by that marker by their bunkie, and then
TBM number 2.
Just look at TBM number 2. They put a pin in one of our oak trees. We're just confused by what that is.
We're a little confused.
Yeah.
Does anyone know?
I will refer to township staff to see if they have any information on that.
Thank you, Chair. So I kind of took some notes on the questions that you had, but feel free to seek any further clarification. So the aerial imagery that's provided within the staff report, that is taken from the Simcoe County GIS mapping system. All those are not the true property lines. That's just provided as an approximation. A survey would be used as the defining of the true boundaries of a subject property. The Simcoe County maps does include sort of a disclaimer that explains how the property lines as depicted on the GIS system are just approximations and not the true legal limits of a property. However, you did speak to the TBM and a survey marker. So the lot grading plan as provided by the applicants and the site plan provided by the applicants with their application as depicted here was signed and stamped by an Ontario land surveyor. So the TBM would be a benchmark that the surveyor would have used to create this drawing. So it is just to assist in identifying property lines, elevations, things like that. So it is a marker from an Ontario land surveyor.
Okay, so really, it's no indication that that's thought to be on the subject property because it's on our land, correct?
That's correct. It's just a benchmark that the surveyor would use to assist them in the preparation of their survey.
Okay, one other question. I'll leave that up, would you please? This particular picture, it's just a little confusing to me. Is the structure's footprint the same, the proposed structure's footprint, the same as the existing structure's footprint? I mean, it's a little confusing with the arrows and whatnot, if that's true.
Let township staff comment on that as well.
Thank you through the chair to Marty and Donna. So as seen here, so this large rectangle here is the existing and proposed footprint of the dwelling to be reconstructed. This rectangle to the front is the location of the existing deck to be replaced and a second-story deck to go above. And this here is the proposed enclosed deck. This would be an expansion. However, everything else would be an existing footprint on the property. It can be a bit hard to see. Does that assist in sort of clarifying?
Yes, that was great.
Well, we have another question, and that's the existing property has 3 bedrooms. If they're building a second story, how many bedrooms is this property going to have?
Just 3. Because the main floor is just going to be a family room, a kitchen, and a breakfast area. It is intended for my wife and myself as a retirement place. So it's just 3 bedroom, and the 2 additional bedroom is just a spare bedroom for kids to occasionally visit us. So it's the same amount of bedrooms.
And the bunkie is indicated as being removed, correct?
Yes, correct.
Anything else, Pat?
I think that's really good. Well, we just want to make sure that whatever it's on, that there's room for those people to park in their own property and maybe even put their dumpsters in their own property. They leave them out like 24.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't, sorry, I'm not sure if this is appropriate for this meeting, but you know, with I know there's been some questions with and contentious dispute with regards to, you know, whose land belong to and so on. But you know, as far as how we use our lot is really what is on the survey, and I apologize if the garbage bin happened to, you know, marginally sit on your property line. And I think that's because, you know, the garbage man, you know, they're doing their best to put the garbage bin back to where the proper location. But I would say from time to time, you know, so I think I apologize if it actually happened to be approaching on your property line. And on further on that note with parking, I don't recall any of my relatives or people that I know of would park in your lot. So if next time if it ever happened, please, you know, let me know the license plate, and then I'll talk to. It might not belong to our family, so I'm not sure, but please do let us know so then we can you know, avoid that situation going forward.
Well, it's not, it probably isn't your family because it's been used as a short-term rental. So it's the renters, and if there's 4 or 5 cars
Excuse
parked
me,
there.
can you stop speaking?
Okay,
For the purposes of this meeting, we are here to discuss the minor variances. The other issues that you're describing are not part of this application, and they should be dealt with outside of this meeting.
Well, thank you.
okay, sorry.
Do you have any other further questions pertinent to this application?
Not at this time. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party when commenting. Please give your name and address for the minutes. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare the public portion of this application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on the application?
I'm just through you, Chair. This is a comment to the committee. I would support a deferral of the application, like I did the last time, to allow the applicant to go back and revise their application to bring it more in conformity with the Planning Act and provincial requirements. So I would support the deferral at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Mossy, or Member Mossy?
I guess my question is, so the existing structure is going to be raised and then added on top? Is that, sorry, question to staff through the chair?
Through the chair to Member Bossy. So the application currently proposes essentially a reconstruction of the dwelling using the same footprint to add that second story and additional deck space. The applicant could probably clarify if they do intend to raise the cottage. My understanding is that the the height request has to do with the slope of the roof.
To the applicant, can you just clarify if you're planning to raise the foundation?
Yes. We plan to add 2 cinder blocks to existing foundation. Yeah.
Sorry, just in addition to, through the chair, in addition to the additional cinder blocks, are you not adding an additional story to the property?
Yeah, so the construction would involve lifting the existing structure and adding 2 cinder blocks in height. So I think approximately about 16 inches. And then we would lower back the existing first floor. And then for the second story, we would just add the second story on top of the existing structure. Sorry, was that?
I think that was a
yeah.
description of what you were planning. If I see no further comments or questions, could township staff please read any conditions and provide any further comments?
Thank you through the chair. There's no recommended conditions at this time. Staff would be recommending a deferral of the application, and I've included a staff recommended motion on screen for your consideration.
So I have before us motion COA 2024-002, moved by Member Bossy, seconded by Member Hawkins, that staff report D24-001 be received and that minor variance application A 18-22 be deferred to a later Committee of Adjustment meeting pending further information as outlined in Staff Report D24001, and that applicants review the limited policy analysis within the Staff Report D24001 and consider a revised submission and or further planning justification. And further to that, notice be recirculated for the application requiring a recirculation fee in accordance with the user fees and services charges by law. If I can get a vote, we are carried. So thank you. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can we have a mover and a seconder for that motion? Just we'll need to revote on that. Sorry. Can I have a mover and a seconder? I thought they were up there already. So we don't normally. Can I get acknowledgement from the mover and the seconder? Thank you. And now can we get a vote? Do I have to reread it? Okay. Thank you. We are carried. Sorry. We will now move on to new applications. So we have an application for consent B08-2023. Would township staff please introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated? Thank you, Chair. The next application is a new application. It is an application for consent affecting the lands municipally recognized as 60 Gray Street. We did receive additional correspondence from the public regarding this application. I can summarize that for you now. Cindy Cronin-Williams, located at 58 Gray Street, has provided comment on the application. Just inquiring and stating comments on the design of the building, as well as potential for a fence adjacent to the laneway. So as depicted on screen and as described within the staff report, the subject property is located within the settlement area of Coldwater. The lands are just south of the intersection of Gray Street and Anderson Line. The existing committee members might recall that this was a lot that was originally severed off of the large property and is now currently under development with a semi-detached dwelling. The subject property does have a site-specific R2-3 zone, and the development occurring on the property is in accordance with that zone, with a semi-detached dwelling being a permitted use. So essentially this application would seek to sever the subject property and the semi-detached dwelling approximately in half. So that would go down the center line of the semi-detached dwelling, with both the severed and retained lands, each retaining one of the units of the semi. The proposed severance appears to meet the lot requirements for the R2 exception 3 zone. So both the severed and retained lands would each have an approximate area of 439 square meters with an approximate frontage of 9.6 meters. So both lots would comply with the lot requirements for the R2-3 zone as it is proposed. This is a sketch of the proposed severance as provided by the applicants and their agents. The light yellow would be the severed lands, the darker yellow would be the retained lands, and this just depicts very clearly the proposed severance of the property down that center line of the semi-detached dwelling. So these are some photos taken of the site currently under development. Again, the property is in the process of being developed eventually to be divided down that center line wall. The development occurring on the property does have an issued building permit and complies with the R2-3 zone. And as outlined in the staff report, these lands are located within a fully serviced settlement area, which is intended to be the focus of growth and development and intensification per applicable policy, being the PPS, the growth plan, the county official plan, the township official plan. And this would seek to support a range and availability of different housing types within the settlement area, satisfying the intentions of those applicable policy documents. We have received some comments from internal departments. The chief building official notes that there is no objection to the proposed application for the consent. The applicant must ensure that the construction is in compliance with the approved building permit application. The Public Works Department, has also commented. It is understood that there are no proposed changes to the lot grading plan as a part of the severance. So that's the lot grading plan associated with the building permit application. Through communications with the utilities manager, they are going through the process of determining if there are existing certain water and sewer connection in front of the severed property. Staff continue to include the recommended condition for the water sewer agreement to the satisfaction of the Public Works until either that be required, or if it is determined that there is an existing connection there, then that would satisfy that condition. So staff continue to include that as a recommended condition until the Public Works Department has completed their investigation. But no other comments or objections were received from the Township Clerk or Fire and Emergency Services. Enbridge has provided a comment just indicating that they do not have any objections to the application as proposed. However, they reserve the right to amend their development conditions. They also acknowledge that it's the responsibility of the applicant to verify that the existing gas servicing does not encroach on more than one property when subdividing or severing. So as the subject application appears to comply and conform with all applicable policy, planning staff have no objections to the provisional approval of the application subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. So these are the standard conditions that are applied to most every consent application within the township. So that being a reference plan be prepared and reviewed and duly registered. A copy of the electronic registration in preparation draft deed, municipal taxes be paid, a payment of a 5% in lieu of parkland, a dedication, the applicants obtain an entrance permit onto Gray Street to the satisfaction of the Public Works Department if required. It's acknowledged that the applicants do have an existing entrance, but if any modifications need to be made to accommodate the severance, it's possible that additional approvals from the Public Works Department may be required. So that's why that condition is still included. The applicant applies for water and sewer connection for the bylaw. Again, the Public Works Department is currently undergoing an investigation. However, this condition is included just to ensure that there is water and sewer connected to the property. That all fees and disbursements, if incurred by the township, shall be paid by the owner, and in accordance with the Planning Act, that the conditions set out here and be completed within 2 years of the date of the decision of the committee. But that's my conclusion of the staff report. The applicant's agent, Mr. Josh Morgan, is in attendance via Zoom this evening. However, staff are available with any questions. Thank you.
Does the applicant and or his or her agent have anything further to add to the application? Please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like to. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Sure. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Josh Morgan. I'm a registered professional planner. The name of our company is Morgan Planning and Development, based in Aurelia. Thanks to Emily for a very fulsome presentation. I do have a PowerPoint, but I don't think it's necessary for me to go through it. Just to summarize, the purpose of this application is to sever one lot. The site is currently under development. The proposed severance is in compliance with all provisions of the R2-3 zone. So there is no relief required from the zoning bylaw whatsoever in order to accommodate this severance. And just from a big picture policy perspective, what we're applying for here is fully supported by the intensification policies outlined in the township's official plan and the overarching direction provided in the growth plan and also the provincial policy statement. So in my view, this is a very straightforward application. It's on a municipal road, it's municipally serviced. It's a building that is already under development and fully complies with the zoning bylaw. So I believe it's appropriate, and I request that you approve the application this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare the public portion of this application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide any comments on the application? Could township staff please read any conditions and provide any further comments?
My apologies. Thank you, Chair. So through the chair, and thank you, Member Vandergeest. So as discussed, the conditions are included in attachment 4 of the staff report, and we've discussed them this evening. So there's no further conditions or correspondence received related to this application. However, staff do have a recommended motion for consideration by the committee.
Okay, if we can see the motion. So before us, we have motion COA 2024-003, moved by Member Hawkins, seconded by Member Mossy, that staff report 2024-002 be received, and further that in the matter of consent application B0823 be provisionally approved subject to the recommended conditions included in attachment 4 of staff D24002. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Good. And now can we have a vote? And we're carried.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. So next we have application for minor variance A-20-23. Would township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated?
Thank you, Chair. The next application this evening is minor variance A-20-23 for lands located at 3034 Maclean Lake North Shore Road. The agent on file for this application is Matt Reid of Sketch Design Build Inc. Here we have a key map of the subject property. The subject lands are located on the northeastern shores of Maclean Lake, accessed via Maclean Lake North Shore Road, which does lead down to Janes Lane and eventually out to Upper Big Chute Road. The 2023 aerial imagery of the subject lands outlined in red, you can see at this time earlier in the spring of last year. The subject property was vacant and undeveloped. Since that time, the property owner has obtained a building permit for the construction of a new dwelling on the subject property in accordance with all zone provisions. In addition to that, a building permit was also obtained for the installation of a septic system to service that proposed dwelling. The applicant at this time is proposing to construct a detached garage and a boathouse on the subject property. The requested minor variances do include an increased accessory building height of 6.11 meters, where 5 is normally permitted, a reduced interior side yard setback for the boathouse of 1.5 meters, where 4.5 is normally required, as well as an increased lot coverage of 19%, where 15% is normally permitted. Following the issuance of the notice of hearing, it was noted by township staff that an additional minor variance would be required to facilitate the construction of the boathouse on the property, being that the variance would be required to recognize the frontage of the subject property at 26.35 meters, whereas the bylaw would normally require that a property have 30 meters in order to be eligible for the construction of a boathouse. Township staff do feel that the notice of hearing was broad enough to include this additional minor variance this evening and allow the committee to consider it. Should the committee feel differently, they may choose to defer the application and direct that additional notice be required. Here we have the site plan of the subject property. You can see that existing dwelling with associated decking, which is currently permitted under a building permit, as well as the installation of a septic system in the rear yard. This minor variance would focus around the construction of the detached garage in the rear yard here, as well as the construction of a future boathouse in the front yard as shown here. As you can see in this site plan, the development has generally been clustered in the rear yard of the property. Everything has been pushed back as far as possible in accordance with the zoning bylaw provisions. The front yard, for the most part, has been left open and has opportunities for revegetation and renaturalization in accordance with those growth plan policies. Here we have a couple elevation drawings of the proposed detached garage. As you can see, the measurement here is that height of 6.11 meters. I would point out to the committee that this garage is still less, the height of this garage is still lesser than that of the principal dwelling. So it does maintain that relationship of having the detached garage be incidental and subordinate to the principal building, which is the intent of the zoning bylaw. Here we have just a couple site photos. This is taken at the rear of the property. There is an existing accessory structure here which would be removed to facilitate the replacement of it with the detached garage in the rear yard. Additionally, here we have a picture of the front yard of the property, and that boathouse structure would go in this area here, just offset. The property line approximately follows this tree line, and the boathouse would essentially go here. I would point out to the committee that this boathouse is relatively small. It's about 9 square meters, less than 100 square feet, based on the drawings which were provided. So essentially it would, resemble more of what the committee may be familiar with in a shed rather than a boathouse. But provided that the applicant is going to be storing marine equipment in there, it does meet the definition of a boathouse and may be permitted within the front yard. These two photos here are again just of that front yard. It is quite open at this time, so therefore the recommendation to include a development agreement to allow for the renaturalization and planting of a vegetation protection zone across this front yard is recommended by staff. So just in summary of the staff report, planning staff do feel that the application conforms to and does not conflict with the applicable policies of the provincial policy statement or the growth plan, and does meet the 4 tests as required by the Planning Act. The development has generally been scaled appropriately to the size of the subject property, and there would be no impacts to the private servicing as a result of the proposed development. The development has generally been concentrated in that rear yard of the property, maintaining the setback to allow for the natural function of the shoreline area. There were no comments or objections received from the clerk's office, the building division, or the Public Works and Fire and Emergency Services Department. So for all of those reasons, planning and development staff have no objection to the provisional approval of the application this evening, subject to the recommended conditions. Those conditions are pretty standard for this type of development, being that municipal taxes be paid to date, the construction shall be in substantial compliance with the plans that are submitted with the application, and that the property owners enter into a development agreement with the municipality in order to establish a vegetation protection zone and restore the shoreline vegetation to the maximum extent possible and provide for additional plantings of native self-sustaining species and or measures to enhance the vegetation within the front yard. Include the collection of securities for the implementation of the VPZ and retention of it for at least 18 months. Provide for silt fencing and construction-related measures to protect the immediate shoreline area during revegetation, and that all costs associated with that agreement would be the responsibility of the property owner. So that concludes my presentation on this application. If the committee has any questions, I would be happy to answer. I do also believe that Mr. Reid is in attendance this evening as well via Zoom and may have some comments he wished to make to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant or their agent have anything further to add to the application? Please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like to. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Good evening, committee members. I'm Matt Reid from Sketch Design Build here on behalf of the owners, Justin and Melissa. Thanks, Brad, for presenting our proposal. The only thing that I would add would be I do have an image that does show the cottage and the garage as one, if anyone's interested, just to see that, just to help justify the scale, like the height of the garage. Show you that right now. So everyone can see my screen. You can see if this is a view from the driveway of the cottage with the garage beside it. So we designed the garage in a way just to match the architectural style of the house and fit in proportionately, massing wise. I just also wanted to note there is no basement or crawl space underneath the main cottage. So that's why we have that kind of like storage area above the garage, so they can store some of those things. So I think other than that, that's all I have to add.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or who wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Microphone. Or
You can come around on the other side if you'd like.
Part of the group.
Yeah.
Dennis Collier, 112 Morton Avenue, Sharon, Ontario. And part of this plan that I object to is only the storage shed, or as they call it, the boathouse. I object to it being closer to the lot line because it will be directly beside our screened-in porch. We're on the right-hand side of the way this plan shows it. So it will be basically right up against us, almost 15 or 1.5 meters from the lot line. So, I mean, it will stop the sun from coming into ours. It will block our view at that point. So, I mean, if they're going to have it, I would prefer it be the 4.5 meters away as allowed.
I guess just clarification for me, that was for the proposed boathouse. Okay. That's all your comments?
That was my only objection, yes.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare the public portion of this application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Hopkins?
Hello. Hi, this is Gary Horvath at 3040 North Shore Road. I'm not directly beside the property, but my property line runs across the backside of the property, and access to this lot is comprised of access down my property to gain access onto this property. And I have a question. One is, are the setbacks on the back corner of the garage at the back of the property line, and because I can't read it on the dimensions that are on the drawings that I've got, are they within the bylaw requirements in terms of dimensional setbacks?
So if I can get township staff to please comment on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, the rear yard setback of the proposed detached garage is in compliance with the requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, but is that considered a side lot or a back lot?
It would be considered a rear yard setback.
Because that's my side lot.
Yeah, so in this case, it is the subject property's rear yard, but in your case, it may be your interior, your side yard.
Mm-hmm. But I just see, like, I think if I'm reading this correctly, I see 1.5 meters from my property line as the back corner of the garage, and I have a concern about it being as high as it is, towering over the property line. You know, right over the access road.
So through the chair, the township zoning bylaw does permit accessory buildings to have a reduced rear yard setback. So in this case, a detached garage is permitted a 1.5 meter rear yard setback.
And this is considered a garage, is it? With the upper second floor loft?
Correct. It would have it's a 1.5 story, or it doesn't meet the definition of a 1.5 story building, so it would still be considered a 1-story garage. There's a storage area located above the main floor of the garage, but it doesn't meet the definition of a 1.5 story, so it is still just a 1-story building by definition of the zoning bylaw.
So why do they need the height?
Because they're exceeding the maximum permitted height of 5 meters and requesting 6.11 meters.
I know, but if it's just a storage loft, then why do they need that extra height? That's my question. You know, the principle. I understand the bylaw and the intent of the bylaw with the height of the main building and the size of the second building. Understand that the main building is almost up on a peak or a pyramid and towers over. I've already gone through it once with another cottage on the other side, which towers over my property on one side. So this one's not as bad as that, but I just have a concern.
Okay, thank you for noting your concerns.
That's it. That's all I got to say.
You have any further questions or clarifications? No? So if there are no further questions or comments, I declare that the public portion of this application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on the application? Member Hawkins?
Sorry, just a question on the site plan by the driveway. The orientation of the garage is we're passing or driving over the septic tanks. Is that handling at the permit stage?
So through to township staff.
To the committee, yeah, so the building department was aware of the septic design at the time when the building permit for the house came through. Those septic tanks are specially designed to accommodate being driven over, as they are located within the driveway. So that was reviewed, and those septic tanks are to a certain spec to handle that additional weight of vehicles passing over them.
Thank you. And just one additional comment to the chair. The garage storage, that'll be noted as non-habitable use, like it's not meant to be dwelling or living space, so it'll be noted just as storage.
Correct. To Member Hawkins, the township would ensure that the space would be unfinished and unimproved for any sort of human comfort as part of the building permit process.
Member Mossy?
A question to staff through the chair. Do we have an aerial view of the side yard setback, the 1.5 meters, with the other dwelling showing in this deck?
So I'm just zooming in a little bit here. The property lines may be off a little bit with this, but you can roughly see the existing dwelling on the neighboring property here.
Any further questions, Member Mossy?
Do we know how far the corner of the existing dwelling is to the property line?
To the committee, unfortunately, I don't have that information. It wouldn't have been required as part of this application. I would just point out to the committee that accessory buildings are normally permitted to have a reduced interior side yard setback, such as 1.5 meters. So you know that setback of an accessory building is not uncommon or not ultimately permitted for other accessory structures by the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Member Vandergeest.
This is just to continue to follow the path that Member Mossy was on.
Can I make a comment? This is Gary Horvath again. The screenshot that is presently up on the screen right now, on the left-hand side, the red line that runs up that property line is incorrect by about 10 feet. You can see that there's a definition of a boat up at the top. And then there's a direct line of armor stone that runs up the property line. That line of the armor stone is the actual property line.
So the public portion of this meeting is now closed. So if you could mute yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. Township staff did identify when he started giving his presentation on this particular slide that the red lines were not in the correct locations. So that is acknowledged.
Thank you.
Just through you more to the applicant, I realize accessory structures, but in this case, this is a dryland boathouse or boat port that is being built when the bylaw requires 4.5 meters. It's required for a setback. So through to the applicant, why was this location chosen? Is there other locations that are available within the property to not restrict the view from the neighboring property?
You know, I think the challenge with this is just the shape of the shoreline, right? Is that it is like on a point, and we're doing our best to position the boathouse portion as low as we could. So it is on the lower side. If we moved it to the opposite side, which would be the east side of the property, then it would just elevate it even higher. Could block some views from the currently under constructed cottage as well. So for us, like, we were trying to keep the boathouse as small as possible because we are permitted to do a larger boathouse. Brad, I believe we are allowed to be closer to the water as well, right?
Through the chair, the applicant may be permitted to move it closer to the water, but I would have to take a look at the site plan again. But
yeah, right. So we've kept it back, and think it's an appropriate area, basically, and it's the shallowest part of the lot as well. So as you access the lakefront, you know, that's the side that has the nicest terrain to like walk on type thing. So you should note this is, you know, a future boathouse concept that we have. So, you know, he may or may not actually follow through with the building permit on it, but not that that matters, right? But you know, we wanted to be allowed to have this structure so we could store things from the lake. You know, not having that basement, it's a long way to go to store anything, and there's nothing out there at all. So yeah.
Staff, I see you have your hand up.
yeah, thank you. I would just also like to point out to the committee that Normally, the 4.5 meter setback requirement for a boathouse is to accommodate the mooring of a boat along both sides of the boathouse, as it would normally be considered as an in-water boathouse. That 4.5 meter setback allows for the mooring of a boat on both sides without that boat encroaching across the frontage of the neighboring property. In this case, as it would be a dry land boathouse, the opportunities for the mooring of a boat would not be there along the other side of the boathouse. So those conflicts with the storage of the and parking of marine equipment or vessels, that concern isn't there in this case. So it would, sort of negate that concern of the boat being there, just given that it is a dry land boathouse, and that's why a reduced setback in this case may be appropriate, as explained further within the staff report.
I guess I'll ask one further question, and then I can pass over to Member Mossy. But with the 4.5 meters, is there a reason why we're not just meeting that 4.5 meter? Like, what's the reason from the owner as to why they want it closer to the property line? Obviously, in my eyes, also as a property owner on the water, I would like to have that view from my property. So if somebody's going to put something close to the property line, I would ideally not have it that close in my front yard. So I guess what's the reason for not just going with the 4.5 meters and putting it at that location?
I think it has to do with, the narrowness of the lot itself, right? That we don't have a ton of room. If we conform to the setback, it basically puts the structure like right in front of the main cottage. So we've tried to find that balance of, not asking for the largest boathouse permitted, right? Or as close to the lake as permitted, because we could, have gone the other way too and proposed something even larger that conforms to all the setbacks, which would be an even worse, obstruction of view. So I think like with the size and scale of it, it's quite reasonable. It's, even though we're calling it a boathouse, right? It's more like a shed, It's not a big structure. We're going to keep the height of it down as low as we can, like 8-foot top plate. Just keep it as low profile as possible, and it's just for storage.
Member Mossy.
Question to staff through the chair. Then I guess I'm looking for a definition of why this is considered a boathouse and not a shed, and would it make a difference?
Through the chair to Member Mossy, only boathouse, like there's only limited types of structures permitted within the front yard or within 20 meters of the regulated high water mark on shoreline properties. In this type of development here, because the structure is located within 20 meters, it would have to be considered a boathouse to be permitted within the front yard at all.
So I guess just to follow up to that, what does township go around afterwards to make sure that this is not being used as a shed? I noticed in one of the drawings that it was labeled as proposed shed, and the agent, I believe it is, has spoke to it being a storage shed as well during this presentation. So I kind of wonder at that point, what is, other than the definition from the township standpoint that it can't be in the front yard if it's a shed, what constitutes or what makes sure that this is actually being used as a boathouse going forward?
Absolutely. So to the chair, a boathouse is essentially used for the storage of marine equipment. So, it's the storage of life jackets, canoes, kayaks, a boat, floaties, all those sort of things that are normally associated with, marine or something on the water. It is similar to that of a garage. It's the storage of personal residential items. It's just what would be within a boathouse is more geared towards the storage of marine related personal equipment. The township would be looking to, have everything labeled as a boathouse on the building permit plans. So through that process, the structure wouldn't be permitted to be called a shed. It would have to be labeled as a boathouse, as that would be the only type of structure permitted within the front yard.
Member Hawkins.
Through to the chair, at this time for the storage shed for boat equipment, it sounds like it's just a proposed use. Like there is no design, there's no drawings, we don't have elevations, we don't know what this will look like at this time.
Correct. There was nothing submitted with the application to describe like the elevations of the proposed building. Those weren't provided with this. It is at this point just sort of a conceptual aspect. Staff did pre-con with the applicant before the application was submitted and did suggest, that if the applicant was coming forward to request minor variances at this point, they may want to consider all future development as well. Based on the size of the building as it was contemplated on that site plan, which was included as part of the application package, the building may not require a building permit based on the size of it. Regardless of whether a structure needs a building permit, it still definitely needs to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. But a permit just may not be required based on the size of that. So the applicants may not have construction drawings prepared for something like that, given that a permit may not be required.
Member Mossy.
I guess the question is, if we approve this, we're approving the 1.5 meters, right?
Correct.
So going forward, this isn't going to change from 90 square meters, you said, to, I think you're allowed 110 square meter or 100 square meters. I don't know what the first shed. Like, how do we keep this that it's a certain height, a certain size?
To staff.
Yeah, so to the committee, through the chair, the lot coverage that is applied to this property, the applicant is requesting an increased coverage through this process this evening. So that increased coverage would only account for a boathouse this size as indicated in the application package before the committee. If the boathouse was to be enlarged any more than that, it would exceed the permitted lot coverage and therefore wouldn't be permitted. In terms of scoping the height of the building, no variances are requested to the maximum height provisions for boathouses, which is 4.5 meters within the zoning bylaw. So the applicant would also be restricted to that maximum height of 4.5 meters as well. So through the application, no increase to that boathouse size could be accommodated on site.
So I guess just a further follow up on that point, then we're restricted to the 100 square feet or whatever the number is exactly, but would still be allowed at that point to have a 4.5 meter tall, so almost 20 feet tall structure, the way we would be approving this as is. Is that correct to staff?
Yeah, so 4.5 meters, I believe, is closer to about 15 feet, and that would be to the midpoint of the roof as well. So it might be just it's slightly less tall than what a normal accessory building would be. But yes, excuse me, the zoning bylaw would allow for a maximum building height of 4.5 meters.
I'm sorry to interrupt there. Just to add to that, I was just looking at the zoning bylaw. And I believe the height for boathouses is measured to the highest point of the roof. So the 4.5 meters would be to the highest point of the roof, not midpoint.
Yes, sorry, my apologies. That is correct.
No worries. And we're also allowed quite a bit larger of a size, I believe. They give us an 8 by 10 meter area. for it. So like, this is the thing to keep in mind here too, is like, we're not trying to obstruct people's view. We're requesting a very small boathouse. We could do it a lot bigger. It could be closer to the water too. So I think that this is, you know, a pretty reasonable proposal considering what we could do, right? So, and you know, this new construction, look how far back we are set from the lake, right? Being 20 meters. You know, both neighboring properties, you guys are lucky that you're so close to the water. You know, so something to keep in mind.
Thank you. Member Van der Geest?
See it both ways. Just to be honest, this is more of a discussion point for the committee. I can see it both ways. From the application standpoint, I guess 3 ways: from the application standpoint, from the members of the public standpoint, and then from township staff standpoint. One thing it's difficult to sit here and do is to understand and assume or understand what could happen in the future when drawings haven't been submitted or that. So I would, you know, kind of look at it this way: is I don't really know if I want to make a decision on an unknown at this point when it could impact neighboring properties. So my question would be more to the applicant is, are they willing to withdraw this condition from the proposal, or would they be in support of a deferral to understand what they're really looking for, and submit some sort of building design, so that we can, as a committee, make an informed decision moving forward. So a 2-part question to the applicant through you.
So if the applicant or their agent could speak to that.
Yes, of course. I think that's a reasonable request here, and would put everyone's kind of minds at ease if we did have a design concept for the boathouse building. So we could defer our application in order to prepare those drawings. I do have a question. Just wondering, is it possible to get the detached garage portion of this approved to enter the appeal period for that, or does the whole application have to be deferred?
I will refer to township staff on what the options are for those.
Thank you, Chair. Just 1 second. I'm just consulting here.
Sorry, I'm just gonna jump in here through the chair. I think the committee can do a few different things. They can, you know, defer the part that pertains to the boathouse, and then vote on the part, basically split the variance into 2, because they are asking for 2 separate variances. So if the committee wanted, they could split up the application basically to approve, if they wanted to, or if you wanted to, the 1 application and then defer the second part. That would give an ability, if you wanted to see drawings or if you wanted more information on that second part on the boathouse setback, you could do that. Alternatively, I mean, you could deny one of the parts and approve one of the parts. You could defer the entire thing. It's really at the committee's discretion. Staff might just need a couple minutes to make sure we have the motion right and a subsequent decision kind of wording.
Thank you. Member Mossy?
I would like to recommend that we accept the conditions on the garage and defer the boathouse until we have a further plan.
From the, I guess, to the applicant or their agent, your preference would be to have the garage considered tonight and the boathouse deferred. Would that be a preferred option for you?
Yes, please.
Is the committee amicable to doing something along those lines? Any comments on that? Member Van der Geest?
It's all good as long as one doesn't impact the other, right? So it's all, I have no issues with that as long as it doesn't impact the other, because the last thing we want to do is have a revised application back seeking additional space or additional storage or additional size because of an impact to the other. But either way, doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I would agree with that. I think as long as they can be separated, I see no issues with voting on the proposed garage currently right now, and then deferring the portions that are related to the boathouse. If staff is able to draft a motion along those lines and let us know when they have that available.
Thank you, Chair. Just working on something now and should be able to share it shortly.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I would just like to point out that the condition requiring the development agreement was included because there was development proposed within the front yard, being the boathouse. So staff would recommend that if the committee doesn't want to consider the minor variances related to the boathouse at this evening's meeting, then that perhaps amended conditions could be considered for the detached garage only.
I think that makes sense.
And I guess the last thing here is if the committee is looking to see the variances which are deferred related to the boathouse be recirculated before coming back to the committee, or if the committee feels whether or not an additional public meeting is required.
Member Van der Geest?
I think based on the discussions that were presented this evening, that it might be worthwhile to have a recirculation of the notice circulated again to allow neighboring properties to provide an opinion on the application should it require it.
I think that would be beneficial just because at that point, then those neighboring properties are at least aware of what the plans would be. Because as of right now, we didn't really have any plans to make a decision on. So I think that would be prudent for us to do for the public so that they have that right to kind of come and give any of their objections or support.
Through the chair, if I can just make an additional suggestion, which Brad's already typing here. Thank you, Brad. Just so the committee knows, we do have a policy at the township that files that are inactive for 1 year, township staff can start a process to close them, and we're looking at revising that policy right now. So just in case this property owner, for whatever reason, doesn't want to resubmit or doesn't want to go through this process, or even does want to go through this process, basically they'll just have one year from today in order to act on that without having to submit a new application. And Brad, I think the recirculation fee should perhaps also apply.
So I guess one question that was just brought up here, there was discussion about it not being permittable to actually live in that space. Does something need to be in here for that, or because it's deemed garage space, that's taken care of by current bylaws outside of this?
Sorry, within the proposed detached garage in the rear yard?
Yes, basically the second story of it, the storage area, quote unquote.
Yeah, so the township zoning bylaw would already prohibit any living space from occurring or being permitted within that detached garage. So it would be my opinion that the committee doesn't need to include anything like that in the motion.
Okay, thank you. So is there any further committee discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. So before us, we have motion COA 2024-004, moved by member Vandergeest, seconded by member Hawkins, that staff report D24-003 be received, and that minor variances associated with A20-23 related to the detached garage be approved, subject to the following conditions: municipal taxes to be paid to date, that the construction shall be in substantial compliance with the plans submitted with the application, and that the existing vegetation on the property be preserved and enhanced as much as possible. And further, that the minor variances associated with A-20-23 related to the dryland boathouse be deferred pending receipt of construction drawings. And further, that the minor variances associated with A-20-23 related to the dryland boathouse be recirculated within 1 year of the date of the deferral, and the applicant be responsible for payment of the recirculation fee. If I can get a vote. We are carried. All right. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. We now have an application for minor variance A-21-23. Would township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated?
Thank you, Chair. Our final minor variance this evening is A-21-23 for lands located at 3129 Mossy Stonecrop Trail. Again, Matt Reid of Sketch Design Build is the agent on file for this application. Here we have a key map of the subject property shown in red, located on the western shores of Lake Couchiching, just north of the settlement area of West Shore and just south of the settlement area of Washago. Mossy Stonecrop Trail is essentially a sort of dead-end road that comes off of Highway 11 North and goes down to service a handful of properties here along the shore of Lake Couchiching. The 2023 aerial imagery, you can see the property, has a little bit of a clearing here in the center. A majority of the, existing vegetation on the property has been maintained. The applicants have started to clear some of the property through the issuance of a building permit to facilitate the construction of a single detached dwelling with an attached garage. The applicants are requesting a minor variance to permit an increased accessory building height for the attached garage. They are requesting a height of 5.8 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw would normally permit a height of 5 meters. We have a site plan of the subject property. This plan is quite detailed and was highly prepared in consultation with environmental consultants through the former zoning bylaw amendment application that this property was subject to. So through that, there was the requirement for the installation of the silt fencing around the entire development envelope, the scoping of the driveway location, the requirement for the retention of all vegetation outside of these areas. The applicants are also proposing some renaturalization and replanting, as shown here on the plan as well as the enhancement and planting of native species here within the front yard to restore to the maximum extent possible the shoreline area. Here we have just some elevation drawings of the proposed dwelling. I would point out to the committee that the building permit that was issued for this dwelling and attached garage included a compliant, a compliant attached garage. So the garage with the building permit does comply with the 5 meter height requirement. The applicant chose to submit this minor variance concurrently with the building permit application to allow them to start some limited construction works on site while they approach the committee to request this increased accessory building height. I would point out to the committee that the increased height of the garage still maintains it as being less than the height of the dwelling, keeping that balance of the accessory building being incidental and subordinate to the principal building itself. Here we have a couple site photos. There's really not a whole lot to show there on site. It's pretty vacant. The building envelope that was created, does have the silt fencing, so staff were pleased to see that the silt fencing was installed on site prior to any sort of works being done here to protect the integrity of the shoreline area with sedimentation and erosion control measures. So just in summary of the staff report, township staff believe that the application is consistent and does not conflict with the PPS, the growth plan, or the 4 tests as required by the Planning Act. The existing shoreline vegetation requirement has been established through the previous site-specific zoning bylaw amendment application, and that's why in this particular instance, staff are not recommending the requirement of a development agreement, because essentially all of those requirements have been implemented through the former zoning bylaw amendment application. As mentioned, this application would maintain that hierarchical relationship between the accessory and the principal building on site. The building division did comment to state that although they have no objection to the application, a revision to the building permit application would be required to amend the approved plans should the minor variance be approved. And there were no comments or objections received from the clerk's office, Public Works, or the Fire and Emergency Services Department. So for those reasons, the planning and development staff have no objections to the approval of the application this evening, subject to the recommended conditions, which do include just that taxes be paid to date, the construction be in substantial compliance with the plan submitted with the application, and that the existing vegetation on the property be preserved and enhanced as much as possible in accordance with the site-specific shoreline residential 26 zone requirements. So that concludes my presentation for this application. If the committee has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. And just as a reminder, Mr. Reid is in attendance for this application as well. Thank you.
Does the applicant or their agent have anything further to add to the application? Please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Thank you, Brad, for that presentation there. I've got nothing else that we need to add at this time, but happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare that the public portion of this application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? If I can call for a motion. So before us, we have motion COA 2024-005, moved by member Vandergeest, seconded by member Mossy, that staff report D24004 be received, and further that minor variance application A-20-23 be approved, subject to the conditions included as attachment 5 to staff report D24004. Can I have a vote? And we are carried. If I can, any reports from officials or correspondence? If I can get a motion for adjournment. Motion COA 2024-006, moved by member Mossy, seconded by member Hawkins, that the Committee of Adjustment be adjourned at 8:13 p.m. on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024. And vote, and we are carried. Thank you.